Thank you, everybody. And Mark, thank you so much for your leadership and organization of this great effort. What do we mean by a sustainable future? I think we should define our terms quickly and then ask how they can be achieved. To my mind, sustainable development means both social justice and environmental sustainability. So it is the idea of combining economic development with social justice and with a safe environment. We have not accomplished that goal during the 30 plus years since sustainable development has been our supposed organizing principle. The world economy, even before COVID-19, was less and less fair, and the environment more and more degraded with the profound threats, not only from human-induced climate change, but the collapse of biodiversity, mega pollution. Reading a study just a couple of days ago pointing out that air pollution accounts for perhaps 1 in 5 premature deaths in the planet, and these zoonotic events with ever greater frequency, not only SARS-CoV-2, but SARS, H1N1, Nipah, MERS, and other emerging diseases. We have an environmental catastrophe underway. We have a social crisis that is very, very deep. And we have a commitment to a comprehensive approach to solving the challenges of not only economics, but society and environment. Well, we're not doing so, partly because the economic models within our individual countries are deficient. The United States is a vivid example of a country that is extremely rich, but extremely unfair, profoundly racist, high inequality, great injustice, and the oligarchs of the United States never caring about the environment until very, very recently. So the US is an example of a country that can become very rich but fail utterly in sustainable development. The other reason we fail in sustainable development, of course, is the lack of global cooperation, because all sustainable development objectives, both social and environmental, require a high degree of global cooperation. But we are not in a cooperative world environment. We are in a competitive to hostile world environment. Again, I put a lot of the blame on the United States as the world's most powerful country militarily. It has done a great deal of damage to international cooperation over the past 30 years, not being part of UN processes, going to war unilaterally on multiple occasions, imposing unilateral sanctions, politicizing the dollar, even though that's the US, the international key currency, and now trying to instigate a Cold War with China, at least during the Trump years. So if we don't solve our domestic problems of oligarchic economic structures, and if we don't solve our international problems of lack of cooperation, we don't achieve sustainable development, because market forces by themselves can produce wealth, but they do not produce social justice and they do not produce environmental sustainability. So how do we get to where we want to go? I think the starting point is clarity of our objectives. And here the world is better at stating objectives than it is at achieving them. But I think it's notable that the world has stated several absolutely valid objectives. The Sustainable Development Goals is an impressive set of short-term objectives to the year 2030. The Paris Climate Agreement is a valid and very important statement of objectives about the world to 2050. The UN Convention on Biological Diversity is a very important statement of global goals regarding biodiversity. It's a shame the United States hasn't even signed, or I should clarify, the United States signed but never ratified the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is amazing, by the way, how irresponsible of my country. So we have a number of important global goals. I would say they are capped off by our human rights goals. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a set of goals about human dignity and economic justice, the right for every human being to have access to healthcare, education, and social protection. The international covenants of not only civil and political rights, but of economic, social, and cultural rights from the 1960s are, again, very important global goals, but we do not get organized to achieve them because there is far too much internal corruption in the American system, for example, and far too much international hostility and lack of effective multilateralism. Okay, these are trite points, but I think that they're important to say, in my opinion, the most important thing we can do is achieve what we have agreed to do, to take seriously the goals that we have stated and then ask in a practical and rational way, how can they be achieved? Let me take as a case the Paris Climate Agreement. It says that we should aim to limit human-induced global warming to below 1.5 degrees C compared with the pre-industrial level. This year, we are at about 1.25 degrees C. 2020 was the warmest year on record, tied with 2016. Despite it being a La Nina year, which normally would cool the planet, we're in a dramatic state, very close to the limit that we have agreed. What needs to be done? All of the science is consistent that we need to end anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 at the latest. And even doing that gives us no more than a 2/3 chance of success in keeping to below 1.5 degrees C by end of century. So this is our basic objective. We have a international process, the UN Framework Convention. We are having COP26 in Glasgow in November. It seems to me the most basic logic of our situation that every government should come to Glasgow on November 1 with a plan to reach net zero emissions by 2050. This is the basis. The European Union has adopted that by law in the European Green Deal. Japan and Korea have announced these goals. President Biden will adopt this goal. The United Kingdom has adopted this goal. Canada has adopted this goal. China has committed to decarbonize by 2060, which is a big breakthrough, and I expect that China can accelerate that to 2050 because it masters all of the critical technologies. And so this is an example of how we could move from an objective, which has a limit on warming, to a science-based target, decarbonized by 2050, to a set of national plans under a multilateral framework that needs to be coupled with multilateral financing. Because even though the United States pledged in 2009 that developing countries would receive $100 billion or more of official financing for the climate goals by 2020, we are now in 2021, and 12 years after the promise was made, there still is no specific plan for that. That's a shame. that the richest countries in the world cannot follow through on basic, explicit commitments, because $100 billion in this world is just not a lot of money for financing. The most recent emergency appropriation for the US budget is $1.9 trillion, just to keep it in perspective. So we need the goals, the multilateral process, the specific plans of action, and the financing mechanisms around this. I won't belabor this in all of the other areas, except to say that structurally, the challenges are similar in the Convention on Biological Diversity, because there are specific actions on land use and protected land areas that would protect species on land, and there are specific ways to protect the ocean fisheries that could implement the objectives of the Convention on Biological Diversity. But our governments have not taken them seriously, starting first with my own, the United States, which hasn't even ratified the convention. We have several other related goals. Universal access to digital technologies is a similar part of sustainable development now. Funding for all children in poor countries to be in school, which is part of Sustainable Development Goal 4, for example, is a modest outlay requiring about $50 billion a year, but unachieved. So, Henning, my basic argument is we need to get organized. This is a rational planning process. It requires multilateral institutions. It requires a financing model in a world economy of well over $100 trillion a year. Meeting sustainable development is a very low cost. But in a world of selfishness, greed, and short-sighted politicians, it has been beyond imagining up until now. We reached the point of disaster. COVID-19 is not only an accident, it was an accident waiting to happen. It was an accident that was predicted. Climate change, biodiversity collapse, increasing inequality in our societies, lack of taxation of big tech, lack of regulation, lack of access to digital services. All of these are known ills that run counter to commitments that we've made. And we need to roll up our sleeves to have national, regional, and global plans of action seriously undertaken. It's not normal politics. We don't need normal politics right now. We need rational, far-sighted thinking and design. It's not impossible. Human beings know how to do that. Multilateral systems can work, but it's a huge challenge. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey, for your inspiring talk. And if there's some time left for another question, I would like to ask you, or to put it this way, I mean, in history, technology development and innovation was not directed to a clear target or objective. This time it's different. I mean, we have a clear objective that's clear. I mean, by 2050 or even earlier, we have to be fully decarbonized on a global level. How optimistic are you in terms of technology and innovation? I mean, or to what extent? I mean, you said coordination is required on a global level. To what extent cooperation is needed, and also redistribution? I mean, by 2050, we will have 3 billion more people, and these people will be born into developing rather than developed economies. So how can we do that? How optimistic you are? What combination of different policies do we need?
I think the technological barriers are the least of our problems, actually. Even the development of vaccines within 1 year, which is unprecedented for vaccine development, shows us that we are in an accelerated technology mode. The digital revolution and all that that means for biotechnical, for material science, for renewable energy and so forth, is operating at a remarkable pace of progress right now. Even on existing technologies, decarbonizing the global energy system is within reach at less than 1% per annum of world output, probably well below 1% incremental cost of doing so. The reason is that photovoltaics, wind turbines, smart grid, electric vehicles, battery storage have all come down in cost decisively just within the last 10 years. So we're not even beyond technological means with the current technologies, but the acceleration of improvement is dramatic. We've actually very often organized mission-driven technologies. I happen to be doing a lot of reading these days about the original Manhattan Project to develop the atomic bomb in World War II. It's an example, first of all, of accelerated, directed technological development, but it's also a reminder that it often comes in the context of war and comes in the context of national interests rather than global interests. The Moonshot of the 1960s was an extraordinarily intensive and successful technological effort, because when President Kennedy committed the United States to a 1-decade moonshot effort, NASA had no sure plan of how this could possibly be accomplished. And the United States had put one person in suborbital flight for 15 minutes by the time that Kennedy made his speech. So this was a directed technological challenge. The United States invented, with government leadership, the internet, mainly to protect computer communications during nuclear war. Who knew what this was really about to spawn? But that's what DARPA did in creating the internet. The Human Genome Sequencing Project was a directed technological effort with a clear human, peaceful purpose of health. And that result, of course, is a vivid reason why we're able to get a vaccine within 1 year, because of all the science that has attended to genomics during this period. The SARS-CoV-2 genome was posted within 2 weeks of its identification. And then it was posted on January 11th, 2020. Within a few weeks, there were already vaccine candidates established on the mRNA models. So this is the scientific world that we're in right now. If we stop mobilizing it to steal people's identities, to put fake data, to commit cyber warfare and hacking, or to make money on advertising, and actually direct it to the things that are important for us, technology will not be our limit. Our limits are organizational and power relations. The fact that what is good for humanity is sometimes not seen to be so good for the plutocracy or for a particular individual country.